Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest in the LPI series of LinkedIn Live Fireside Chats. And today's topic is a bit of a change from the norm, actually. We're looking at the vendor side of our industry. And the theme today is value that lasts. How can vendors drive both customer success and business growth? And I am delighted to be joined by the fabulous Nikki Samant-Jones. Hi, Nikki.
Hello, Ed. It's a
Nice
great
to see
pleasure.
you.
Thank you for having me, and lovely to see you as well.
I'm really looking forward to this. So a little bit about Nikki. I'm going to embarrass her now for a few minutes here. So Nikki is a growth operator. We're going to find out what that means. And customer leader who has spent her career turning good learning businesses into great commercial engines. So if you work in the vendor side, you're going to be fascinated with what we're going to talk about. She has built, scaled, and led go-to-market teams across SaaS and digital learning, always with one foot in strategy and the other in execution, which is great. What's her superpower? Connecting the dots between customer experience, commercial outcomes, and operational clarity. So whether it's aligning post-sale functions, designing revenue strategies, or embedding customer metrics that actually matter, Nikki's brilliant at making complexity feel navigable and growth feel possible. So she's worked with fast-scaling platforms, global enterprise clients, mission-driven teams, helping them professionalize, helping them retain more customers, and sell with substance. She's the co-host of the Hippo Question podcast, where she talks leadership. I would check that out if I were you. Leadership culture and why performance really comes down to people. Controversial statement these days in the AI age, so we'll find out about that as well. At heart, I think it's fair to say she's service-minded, psychology-led, commercially sharp, and probably at her best when helping organizations grow in ways that are not just smart, but also human. So again, Nikki, thanks for joining us. I'm going to set the scene here, and then we're going to go straight into it, if you don't mind, because we've got around about half an hour to chat, and then we'll take some questions for 10 minutes, if that's all right with you.
Fabulous. And thank you again, Ed, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here today because this isn't just about sales for me. This is all about relationships, building relationships that actually last. And when we get that right, growth becomes the natural outcome. It's not the constant chase anymore. So excited to be here.
I couldn't agree more. I'm obviously a big fan of the work that you do. I think you're a great demystifier. So we're absolutely delighted to be listening to you today, sharing your expertise and your wisdom. So let's set the scene. So in 2025, customers expect more than a product or a service. That's what we're seeing. They want a partner, and they want a partner who's going to help them achieve their goals and deliver that ongoing value. At the LPI, we're seeing that the vendors who are succeeding are those who are constantly iterating and proving their impact and aligning their growth to customer success. What I want to explore with you initially here is how vendors can deepen those relationships. We're going to touch on how to shift from transactional to value-led. We're hopefully going to uncover some practical methods to look at customer needs and link them to business solutions. Obviously ROI, but also loyalty is going to come up, I think, quite a lot in this next half an hour. So if you joined us and you're working for an established vendor or just refining your customer engagement approach, I think this fireside chat is going to provide you with some clear, actionable strategies. Why now? Because I think there's rising competition, a lot of evolving customer expectations, and the move towards long-term value partnerships. Trust is a huge part of this. So big question to start with, Nikki. Where do you see the learning sector at the moment in terms of economically?
Ed, there's so much change afoot, not just in the learning sector, but in the entire marketplace, no matter what product you're selling, right? But there is a particular, I have a close affiliation to the learning sector. So for me, it's been a period of excitement in terms of growth and how I think 2025 is a pivotal shift with how people were approaching buying learning, right? Particularly to where acquisition of learning and where the learning is placed is shifting as well, right? So, there was this big advent of the learning experience platforms, and we know that continues and people are really focused on making sure they have right. But every time I've spoken to clients in the last sort of 8 months, it's been, oh no, we're consolidating our learning platforms. We don't need so many anymore. We just want everything to be where our people need it to be, right? So with the
Mm,
advent of AI features in Outlook, etc., in Gemini and ChatGPT, etc., as well, they're really questioning what values these platforms are adding, the learning platforms, right? So there's been a tremendous shift in analyzing the digital footprint of learning and how that makes an impact, a true impact. Because, gone are the days almost of metrics like time on platform or completing a quiz at the end of it and getting a full score, etc. People are looking for
mm,
real shift and real outcomes of whatever learning is being delivered. There's also the consciousness of budgets, right? And a lot of businesses are shrinking their spend on learning because as a result of natural transition, whether the business plan has changed for an organization or shareholders are demanding more profitability, ultimately some of the things that go as a first sort of step, if you like, before they can touch people themselves, the human resource, is things like learning, etc. So the spend on learning is decreasing from what we're seeing across the globe, but we're also seeing people are becoming a little bit more strategic in terms of that little purse that they have to spend on learning is being used to deliver the best outcomes that are required. There's a lot of future proofing of talent and talent succession coming in. There are new skills required to succeed in
mm,
today's world. So the learning shift, while so I can still remember in 2021 during the COVID periods, there was a lot of shift from face-to-face learning to virtual learning, right? And now we're seeing this come back into people are being asked to come back into the offices. There's a lot more, okay, the physical is needed for collaboration and cooperation and activities that promote innovation. And so we're seeing that learning is also being evolved to come more in a place of let's do some blended learning, but a lot of face-to-face is being requested as well. So there's quite a shift, and vendors are having to be agile, more agile than ever before. And if you have a platform, that's even more challenging because how does your platform then fit into all of this change and scrutiny that digital learning is having these days as well? So I'm seeing quite a shift, but the excitement for me is if you can be agile and you can start looking at AI is throwing in some amazing things like you can have personalized coaches on your platform, you can integrate through either XAPI integrations, etc., but be present in the place of where your employee needs the product, your product, then you have a chance to be different, to stand out in the crowd of suppliers that is out there right now, but also provide, and all of this assumes, please, Ed, that you have a very robust learning offer in the first place, right? So the
yeah.
qualitative aspect is not being considered here because I'm taking that as a given, but you have to start making small differentiators. And I think it brings me back to a key thing. People are buying from people they trust and people they like.
Well, that's
So
the interesting thing, Nikki, because
mhm,
I've probably spoken about trust more on LinkedIn than any other topic, right? And I've been in this industry for around about 30 years, and the one trend I could say over 3 decades is it seems to have moved consistently towards this idea of convenience.
mm,
So I need that whatever I need it to be as quick as possible. And you would go to events like Learning Live, Learning Technologies, and the vendors would be saying, well, this, we now have this widget. It's the quickest. It will get you to the point where you want the information really quickly. Is that not the enemy of meaningfulness, convenience? Or does convenience get a bad press? You've worked with some of the biggest technology providers and you've advised sales teams now. How do you see that?
I think there's a balance to be had, Ed. It's a great question, by the way, because I don't think convenience is a bad thing. We are short of time, right? Would you rather not be doing something else or adding another activity to your list, perhaps, even in sales, right? Uh, which helps you develop a bigger pipeline or get more in people's faces in terms of relationship building and time spent building trust, etc. So if I can get the convenience aspect, so I can get perhaps AI to draft an email where I would have spent, maybe about 20 minutes crafting a personalized email to a client to build that relationship. If I can get that little bit of help, which is convenience, right?
Hmm.
It allows me to do more. And I think what people need to recognize, vendors and salespeople, is you need to start prioritizing where convenience can help you become more engaging and impactful. So use the convenience to become what you truly want to become, which is a trusted partner to your
Mm.
clients, and bring that with you to them. So even, so I don't know, if I was going to look at, for example, leadership program, selling a leadership coaching program to a client,
Yeah.
and I've got marketing who's done a little bit of, okay, they made a great product brochure and everything else for me, all done, put together, the learning experts put in all the content, etc. I can send that out, and that's convenience, right? That's quick and easy. But the way I can add value and bring real relationship trust to the client is by actually showcasing or introducing them perhaps to another client that has used this solution previously, or digging
Right.
up things that I really, I know that the client will go, oh, I recognize that. That is one of my KPIs. That is one of my metrics. That's where my organization wants to go. And I can now use this. So I say use the convenience to build value.
Okay, that's great. And if we take that into a sales situation, then looking at individual skills across salespeople, I mean, there's an existential crisis for salespeople probably at the moment. What is their role in a world where so much of the decision is made electronically? So
Hmm.
I'm going to try and call you out on this as today's representative of sales across this sector. I see a lot of salespeople still who are focused on the deal, right?
Mm,
And the language that they're using will be, have you closed that deal yet? Is that deal in?
mm,
How do you go about when you're transforming sales teams? How do you go about changing that mentality so that they're more focused on uncovering what you talk about a lot, which is the customers and what
mm,
they truly value beyond that idea of an immediate sale? That's a
mm.
huge thing to turn around, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think, as any great sales leader will know, it starts with your playbook, right? With your plan and your playbook, because you can get some great salespeople who are organically really in tune with clients and what clients need, etc. Right? And for them, the difficulty perhaps in today's world is exactly what you said, Ed. People are buying online. People don't want to talk to salespeople anymore. If I can get a great salesperson in front of a client, I know I can get a sale, but I can't. So there is a bit of work in that playbook to be done in advance. So as an example, getting an organization to have a really clean website. And when I say clean, I mean when somebody lands on your website, does the website tell you exactly what value you offer? Right?
Mm.
Or is it just a bunch of fluffy words that people don't understand and kind of go, okay, they're not going to solve the problem I have or the pain I have. And for that, for your website to make sense, and this is a marketing and sales thing, because sales talks to customers, and what you need is for sales to be the voice of customer to your internal teams, right? If you're going to bring cohesion about with marketing and sales and product, then sales needs to take the customer feedback and the customer pain and translate that so that marketing can create a great website, right?
Mm.
That talks to the customer pain. So again, you're helping sales achieve their goals and their targets. And targets, deals, the language of sales is really important as well, because what it does is give structure. If as a sales leader, you can't just leave your sales teams to just get on and do whatever, right, without having any way of monitoring what is going on. What's your pipeline looking like? As a business leader, you need to know as a vendor where your next recurring revenue is coming from as well, and what client
Mm.
movement there is, etc. So you do need checks and balances, but your playbook can shape how people have these conversations and how your lead generation works. So, as a CRO, say, in any sort of business plan or sales plan, you have to work closely with marketing in the first place. And there's a lot of movement or shift towards product-led growth, letting your product dictate your growth. So going online and buying something, right? Like what SaaS and EdTech do, which is
Mm.
if you want a license, you start with a freemium version or a trial, and then you go into license. And all of these areas, and a playbook forms part of each of these steps, where you can have certain criteria created or certain alignment with client pain created, which makes the life of sales easier. So that when a client buys either a trial version, like a freemium, or they've
Hmm.
paid $10 a month or whatever and started with the 1 month, whatever, sales then has the opportunity to get front and center, right? You then are having those very strategic conversations where you start adding value and you upsell and cross sell, which is where true
Yeah.
growth comes from.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think, starting with the groundwork of having a great site, having a great sales playbook, you have the foundations then to manage people and their
Mm,
personalities. So
mm,
on that, moving that forward, then you talk a lot about partnerships and having a partnership mindset. If you were advising a CRO now who's saying, look, we're far too transactional, it's all about, the numbers, but we're not building strong relationships, so we're not getting retention. Can you give us
mm.
an idea? And I don't want to give away your secrets, obviously, it's how you make a living advising these companies. But are there one or two things you could tell us, which would be hints and tips as to how you would move from that vendor mindset to partnership mindset? You've built amazing relationships over the years in vendors of various sizes. There must be some principles there that are consistent throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. A thought that comes to mind is vendors are replaceable, right? Partners are remembered. I have had, clients I haven't worked with, and you mentioned learning technologies exhibition that I've bumped into or said, okay, once a year we're going to keep up and catch up and go to lunch, etc. Right? And these are kind of stakeholders that consider you a true partner. The relationship lasts for longer than just the transactional side of things. And I think one of the things that you to shift from being a vendor or a transactional sort of salesperson that they view to a true partner is by actually sort of looking at what happens when things are quiet. There's a lot of noise when you're actually being transactional, but does a
Mm,
client what the client reacting when things are quiet is a true teller of whether a client views you as a partner or just a vendor. So, you know, and it's adding value to the client without actually sort of being in the forefront. It's behind the scenes. It's almost sort of being quietly supportive of a client and how they want to solve the pain that they're experiencing. I'll give you an example.
mhm,
A big sort of global beauty brand, one of their HR managers shared that their people were struggling with feedback conversations, right? So, and feedback is such a hugely important thing in any
mm,
organization. And if you can't, whether it's giving or receiving feedback, if you can't have those conversations properly and effectively enough, you're not going to shift or change, and it might even result in conflict, which then sets off a whole chain of reactions and actions, which you don't need. They can be a distraction, and ultimately they can also impact your bottom line revenue as an organization. Now, when they sort of started talking about it, it wasn't formally on the agenda. We weren't supposed to be discussing this at all, but
mm,
where you become a partner is when you kind of go, okay, that sounds like something that's really troubling this HR leader. It's really important. It isn't what they wanted to talk to us about because, we do language or we do culture, we do something else, right? Or whatever our
mm,
product is. But it is about being able to say, hey, I think I can help you with this, right? And then solving the challenge for them. And in this instance, we created a pilot workshop for them about giving and receiving feedback, right? And how this can be done more effectively, but also considering the global nature of feedback, right? How language is used, etc. Now, that act of just pure listening and hearing the pain and then translating it in a way that helped them out immediately
mm,
moved us from just being a vendor to being a partner. And, there are other instances where we've sort of said to a client, they've kind of gone, oh, we need you guys to do this part of our team building program, right? And then after that, we're going to plan some fun activity or something like that later with the team, etc. And it's just kind of going, oh, somebody else had said there's a cool thing for team building, you know, and we just then shared that detail with them, saying, hey, by the way, you can reach out. It had nothing to do with us. We didn't do this particular activity, but recommending, referring them to somewhere to make their lives easy and to help them in the place of need, I think, can shift you from just being purely transactional to being a vendor. And it all starts with great listening. As my mum used to say, 2 ears, 1 mouth, use it accordingly. I
Yeah,
think that's really, really critical, Ed.
it's very true. It's very true. And equally, bad salespeople don't listen, do they? And they just keep pushing that narrative. I think there's one particular thing that you've touched on there, which is probably, you know, my soundbite from this conversation already, which is this idea of well, you're talking around the idea of being there in the quiet times. And I think, you know, when you're working on trying to close something at high level in sales, it's almost that sort of, you know, the moment's gone after the Lord Mayor's show, you know, the deal's done and they kind of have the drop in dopamine. But actually, great salespeople, as you say, you know, touch base and maintain relationships, even friendships, really. I mean, we obviously working in the same industry for as long as I have, you know people very well. They may have a different logo on their polo shirt at the exhibitions that we're at, but you know the individual and they take that with them. It's a cliche, isn't it? But they might move company, but they still remember you as a great partner. So there's value there, isn't there, for the salesperson to be doing that as well. It's not just, you know, the right thing to do, but actually it will give you a return actually as a salesperson. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. And how many times, Ed, in your business as well, where have you hired a salesperson because of the relationships they have, because of who
Mhm.
they know, not just what they know? And I think that's the critical thing. It's taking that
Yeah.
with you, that ability. And you still have to be transactional, Ed. Don't get me wrong. If a client wants you
Yeah.
to tell them what the price and what the discount is, get to it, right? And get to it quickly, but then add value. Moving from transactional to relationship is all about adding value and to
Okay. Well,
become a
let's explore that then.
partner.
Let me
Yeah.
dig into that because
Mhm.
it's an easy thing to say, isn't it? So I'm going to try and put you on the spot a bit here, but
Yeah.
we can all say you need to add value. I think when I speak to salespeople who work in other vendors, they
Mhm.
obviously they agree they want to add value, but how they do that, you know, how can we
Mhm.
do that? We've got under pressure to hit these targets. I can't make
Mm.
everybody my friend, but a few things that I've read that you write about, prominent themes that seem to come out and things that we share as ideals, I think, are
Mm.
proving value through three things: data, because you know that they're facts often, right?
Mhm.
Insights, maybe you know your subjective experience and knowledge, but also, and you know, one of the people I really value most in this industry is Julian Stodd, and he talks about this third one a lot. This idea of storytelling. How do you combine those three things? You know, data, insights, and storytelling.
Mm. So, and I think a great salesperson to move to a trusted vendor partner or an organization who wants to be a trusted vendor partner needs all three, right? Incredibly so. And I think the important thing is to recognize the kind of buyer persona you're talking to. What are they looking for? And I think as you learn your sales skills, right? If you're new to sales and you've got that intrinsic way of building relationships, etc., to move into that, you know, getting to be great at it, you start very quickly recognizing what matters or what is important to the person in front of you, that stakeholder. Why are they going to buy from you, right? What is it that they want you to solve or want you to hear? So I say data is really important to people that need you know, so if I am going to be buying, let's say, language learning, right?
Mhm.
If I have a group of people that need to progress from level A1 to level B1 on the CFR scale, the data is going to show me the outcome and the impact, right? I am going to tell you that it's going to take you X number of hours to get these people from X to Y, right, in the level. That data matters to people because it's a metric, a key metric that is counted upon by the organization and it is going to impact bottom line at the end of the day somehow, right? Because they'll be able to do something in that language, etc. So you've got that data set, and that matters depending on the stakeholders' own metrics and KPIs. And I think that's really important to present. You then have, and I want to get to storytelling because I love that personally, but you then also have things like what matters. So for example, something almost intangible perhaps, or something that's considered a softer, like a leadership skill, right? Like empathy. You know, people come to us sometimes and kind of go, oh, we want our leaders to be more empathetic. We want them to be able to listen better, or we want them to be able to communicate more effectively. Yes, they're all English speakers, but they're leading a team in South Korea. How are we going to do this with empathy, etc.? And that is when I think storytelling comes into its own, in a sense, when hard numbers and data is not going to create the trust, because you don't have the hard numbers. I can't show you how effective a leader has been in South Korea through cultural intelligence with hard numbers. I can't say they've been 80% successful because they said this, because I can't observe that behavior, and neither can a learning stakeholder, because you're relying very much on things going wrong to understand the consequence, rather than actually, and so preemptive will help, but it doesn't give me quantitative data analysis. And so this is why I think all three really matter. But what really a salesperson has to do is try and understand who's in front of them, what matters to them. And which is why when you start looking at a customer, really try and spend a lot of time up front to understand their real goals and what matters to them. One of the typical questions I ask a person when I meet them for the first time, like a client stakeholder, is, how do you like to be communicated to and how often? Right?
Yeah, it's a
So
great
it's a
question. Yeah.
you know, I don't want to bombard. I know when I get sales emails, and I'm like, why would you say that to me? Have you not even looked
You
at my
obviously don't know me. Yeah.
Exactly. You obviously don't know me, and you don't know what matters to me or what I really need help with. So spend some time up front to really understand what matters. And there's a lot of ways you can do that, right? You can do LinkedIn. You can look at, you know, the organizational values, the organizational website, which shows you the culture of and those all feed into learning goals, right? For learning stakeholders or talent stakeholders or DEI stakeholders. So spending some time up front to understand what matters. And if you can see on LinkedIn, like Ed, you post about things that have happened to you, whether you're traveling to LinkedIn, learning tech, or you're going to an LPI event, you talk about things, that observational stuff that you are then analyzing and trying to post on. And if I can read through your posts, and I know everyone doesn't have the time, but if a deal matters, and if your client is an ideal client profile, you better be a great salesperson and spend that time up front to get to know what's important and what matters. And use the storytelling to your advantage as well. Because if I can tell a story about a client that did X, Y, Z, and I'll give you an example. We had an RFP, and they had the vendor partner in place for the previous 5 years, right? And everyone was a bit like, are we going to be able to shift the vendor partner? The incumbent's still there. How's this going to help? What are we going to do, etc.? And we looked at the website, and they'd gone through a major change, a leadership, organizational change, etc. They were changing how they did things, reshaping the business, etc. And so reimagine was a word that was a buzzword across quite a few of their website pages, etc. And so we thought, okay, if they're going to reimagine, they're looking for someone who's going to bring a fresh perspective, right? And a new. It's the same thing, the same bit of learning needs to be packaged as a fresh perspective for them. That's going to have impact because they're reimagining their business. And so instead of writing a box standard Word document response to the RFP, we did a video, and we did a PowerPoint, a very short, to the point PowerPoint. And during the pitch meeting, the first thing they said to us was, you are so refreshingly different. We don't have time to read Word documents. You've just created something that fits us perfectly. It took us 2 minutes to watch the video. And what that gave me was the visibility of whether they'd actually watched the video or not, because they're tracking, there's ways of seeing what's happening, etc., right? How people are engaging with your content. So long answer for a short question, but Ed, that's how I think all three can add value.
No, I love it. I love it. There's a few things I would pick out there. I mean, one of the best leaders, sort of modern leaders, is Satya Nadella, of course, and he talks about empathy being the most important leadership skill in the current age. So I do think the humanity of communication is really important, especially if you're in sales. And I know you're a big exponent of that. The best example that I ever heard of the power of storytelling, and it's not a commercial example, but in the mid 80s, I'm old enough to remember the mid 80s, there was the kind of Ethiopian crisis, lots of starvation happening across Africa, in particular Ethiopia. And the news story on a Tuesday night ran with the amount of people that were starving. And you saw video footage of thousands and thousands of people. And they wanted to try and raise money. But it didn't really raise any money that evening. The following day, they ran a news story on just one girl and really focused on one individual. And what happened then resulted in the creation of Live Aid, Band Aid, because the response was unbelievable, astronomical compared to the previous day. And people still want to feel that there's something they can relate to. You talk about building empathy, but if you don't have something that resonates with you, it won't work. If you move that philosophy into the commercial side, then your company that you were working with that had the idea of going with the video is because you understood the client. You did the groundwork on understanding the client, that they wanted innovation, they wanted reimagination. Well, then they're not going to want the PDF going across. Let's see if we can disrupt everybody else. And we're at the LPI, we're a big fan of doing that, especially with our events. We like to do things very differently as much as we can. So I find that really interesting. And I also think I posted actually about this morning in response to Caleb Foster, who responded to a post that I put out there, that I remember somebody telling me that knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. So if you don't kind of do the work on it and dig one or two layers underneath, you're just going to be out there saying the same thing to everyone. And quite frankly as well, Nikki, I think if that's how people see sales, where it's, I've learned what I'm going to say, I'm just going to keep saying it, surely that's boring. I mean, the best teachers that I know and trainers, they don't focus on what it is they're going to be saying. They focus on the people in front of them and how they want to be learning. And is the Anne Nin quote, I think, where your words no longer belong to you the second you've spoken them, because they're the listeners. So I think that was a really fascinating piece there that you've talked us through. And I do think storytelling is a massively underestimated skill in the modern salesperson, especially when you can get so much information digitally. So working on that, and we've had quite a few questions come in over the last few days on LinkedIn, direct messaging through to us. And I just want to go to a couple of these in the sort of 7 to 10 minutes we've got left. And please feel free, people who are in this, to post some in the chat if you want to. We'll try and get through some. How do you, in your experience, or how have you handled situations where a customer's goals keep changing and it's hard to keep up?
I smile because I've experienced that personally. We've had.
Does that resonate? Yeah.
Absolutely. But and as vendor partners, we probably have family and friends who are going through a restructure and things happening, etc. And we know that every time an organization has a restructure, there's going to be a new set of goals and a new set of skills required. And so it's a moving feast, if you like, and the goalpost is constantly shifting. And I think it's a tough one because what it does is protracts the sales cycle, right? There is no one thing or one solution, because the minute you've said, I can meet this goal, the goals change, which means you might have to reconfigure, restart the process of listening again. And it's a frustration that many times we have to deal with. One of the key things and I think it's a really difficult one, easy to say, very hard to do, is as an organization, as a supplier, vendor, partner, you must know quite firmly upfront what you will not do, right? The kind of sale you don't want, and when to say
no.
When to say no, thank you, but no, thank you, right? we had a client that wanted something around organizational culture and translating organizational culture in the global context to local regional offices, right? And it was so complex because there was and again, every time somebody fed into that goal, the goal shifted a little bit more, right? Internal stakeholders at their end itself, so that the one singular person who was responsible for finding the solution, kept having call after call after call with us to try and just, for them, it was almost like they were just, having an opportunity to have a consultant tell them what they should be doing, or maybe what they should be thinking about, etc. Right? And so protracted so far that you kind of have to weigh up what is the cost of acquisition of this particular client, and is it worth having? And so some of
Right.
those the basics of sales that you need to have in place need to be there. What do you say no to? What are you willing to bend over backwards to get? Because there's a long-term lifetime value of a client that you want. But also, at what point do you say, I think you need time internally to just align your own goals and your own KPIs and outcomes that you want. And then we'll definitely be here waiting, ready to help in any case, in any shape or form you want. The second option sometimes is to help the client really come to a particular goal, right? In a sense, you can actually almost lead them to where you want them to be. If you're a great salesperson and you know them well enough and you know the pain and the organization and what's going on, what are the outcomes that matter, you can sometimes direct the client and get them to come to the point they need to. And that can be done, for example, by understanding what kind of budgets they have, right? And
Yeah.
suggesting a pilot program. If you know they have a budget, a limited budget, and you're willing to work with them on it, you could almost suggest a pilot program which allows you to measure the impact, and then also allows the client to understand that, yes, that's had that impact, that has made the shift or started the behavioral change journey that we wanted for our people. And we need to continue down this route because this is the actual goal for us. So I think you can try different things, but sometimes you might just have to say no.
Yeah, knowing when to walk away. So this idea of controlling conversations, and I mean that in a nice way. Well, we've got a question here from Kenneth, actually. Let's have a look at this. Relationship building is where he spends the majority of his time. It's a comment, really. It's where value lives, and it's where grace shows up. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the
100%.
best commercial people that probably both of us have worked with are, great relationship builders. And you see it at events, that they are popular people or very well respected. I
Yeah.
think one of the best, I think, in the industry, and you can see from the amount of reaction on LinkedIn when they move. I know Kevin Smith, who was a degree and has moved recently. He's just a great guy, and he goes above and beyond, and these supportive messages to people that he's connected to. I have no commercial gain in promoting Kevin, but he's a great example of somebody who just does a good job. Clients seem to love him, partners love him. He's a good guy, really. So yeah, we cannot underestimate the power of great relationship building skills, even though we live at a time where we're trying to kind of make every bit of communication as quick and easy as possible.
Yeah.
There's value, isn't there, in the sort of slow relationship building?
Absolutely. And even in sales, because fortunate are those vendors that get bottom of the funnel leads all the time, people making inquiries, ready to buy, people buying on their e-commerce sites, etc. Right? Uh, But there is a lot of effort and work that goes in to finding and retaining the clients, the ideal client profile that you want, and the longevity. For a client to say yes to a multi-year deal with you, right, means that you've built trust and you've showed them that you can actually understand their need and deliver on the outcomes that they want, right? Otherwise, people are not stupid. They do not sign multi-year deals with you. And I
Yeah.
think to build that trust, and sometimes you have a very small window to build that trust, right? And it all depends on what you're selling and how long your sales cycle is, etc. But you can sort of, within 1 or 2 months, you can bring clients to the point of multi-year deals. But that's only when, and I think being authentic is really important. A
Mhm.
lot of times salespeople think, oh, if I ask them about, I know you've got the LPI background, but I don't know if you look at my background and somebody notices something in my background and says, "Oh, you like flowers or you have indoor plants or whatever," right? And you're disingenuously starting a conversation. You can't sustain that kind of relationship building. It
No.
backfires. You genuinely, I think, a great salesperson who's curious and comes to build relationships from curiosity, and they actually genuinely like people, because you can't fake it till you make it, because it does collapse at some point. So to be able to remember people's dogs' names and when they're having an anniversary, and I have a client, or when I used to be at Country Navigator, one of my clients, and we talked about families, we talked about parents, aging parents, because we're a certain age group where we have our own children, but we also have parents to look after, etc.
Mhm.
Those are connections, and I think connections, real connections, build trust, and these are the kind of people that will want to. They'll kind of go, "Oh, Nikki said that. That must be true. It's fine. We will buy this because it's what is required." And you want to come to that point with
Yeah,
people.
I agree with you. And I think authenticity is a long-term impact strategy, I think. A short-term one is to say whatever you think the client wants you to say. A long-term one is being authentic. Okay, last question here, looking at the list that have been sent through. I'm going to try and pick one out to wrap up on here. And I think Laurel's going to share your LinkedIn profile in the comments as well, Nikki, so that's where people can find you. How do you keep customer conversations focused on outcomes and strategy when the temptation is to move back into product demos? And I think that's the kind of features benefits argument again, isn't it? But anybody that knows you, I think that's kind of synonymous with you, really. In that you're great at talking about value and moving it constantly back to that, so the customer's getting what they want. But that's not easy. Somebody's stepping into sales in this sector. Do you have to know everything about everything? Do you have to be an omniscient presence? Do you have to do the groundwork? Or I know you said that you can't fake it till you make it, but is there a balance there between, look, you just need to know what you need to know, and you need to be able to listen and articulate that. And if you don't know, the answer is, let me get that answer for you. Is that fair?
Absolutely, 100% fair. But actually, it actually does work in your favor for sales. The best sales I've had, right, have always been a tag team kind of sale, right?
Hmm.
Bringing someone on as an expert, even though I know how to answer questions, someone who's non-sales titled, right? So head of learning or head of innovation or head of product or whoever you feel comfortable with, and you know that they'll get what you're trying to sell, right? And they understand your sales playbook a little bit, like the strategy behind what you're trying to sell to the customer. But me actually being able to, they'll say, "Oh, that's a great question for Ed, who is our head of learning," and Ed is seen as the guru of learning, not the guru of sales. So the person at the other end is thinking, Ed's not going to sell me anything. Ed's going to just talk to me about learning and learning outcomes and things like that. But Ed is actually doing selling. So for me to be able to say, "I don't know this, but I will bring you the expert who does know this really well. And the stories that Ed can tell will be different to the stories I share. The perspective Ed brings on the same client challenge will be different to the stories and the perspective I bring." And sometimes it's leveraging the people and the expertise that you have in your own business as a vendor. That is really critical. A lot of salespeople want to shine. The deal depends on them. The deal is only them, etc. Particularly if they're new and they don't know it all. It's great to be able to say, "I don't know this, but let me come back to you," and then follow it up immediately. Timing is critical in sales, right? The longer you take to get back to a client, the less likely you are to close the deal. Let me say that categorically. The quicker you respond, the faster you do things well, the more likely people are to trust you, because people are time poor and overwhelmed. They do not have time
Yeah,
to wait.
it's very true. We're pretty much out of time. I'm hoping that Laurel, who's kindly hosting this behind the scenes, by the way, at the LPI, will post your LinkedIn profile in chat so that people can find where to get you. It's been fascinating for me to listen to you, Nikki. I know that the first time I spoke to you about the idea of doing this, I felt that we should have recorded that conversation. It was already interesting enough, and I learned a lot. I've been lucky to work with some incredible salespeople over the years and sales leaders as well. But I always feel like I learn something every time I talk to you. So I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us today. People can obviously find you on LinkedIn if they want to work with you. Sales leaders, I would encourage you to get in touch with Nikki, who's transformed a lot of them. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody who's joined the webinar today, the Fireside Chat. We look forward to seeing you all again at the next one. Nikki, have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you again for having me. And it's great to have our listeners on board as well. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me or with Ed with the LPI, please do. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.